we click down?
Oh, yeah, the down button.
Okay. And click up. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for having us. It's really great to be here. Nancy, Michelle, thank you for inviting us. We really appreciate it. Feels like I'm come home. You know, I'm so used to being here and not speaking. So, except I think one time as a candidate, and who knows, maybe another time, maybe next year. Speaking of that, Jeff, would you do me a favor? We have a kind of a time limit, about 30 minutes. So would you, so that we do not run long, you know, as a candidate, I know never run long. And I'm so used to, as a candidate, having someone sticking up their hands and saying, you've got this much minute, this minute. So would you, like at 15 minutes, raise your hand, and then at 10 and 5 and so on, we'll make sure we don't take up too much time, and we'll actually try to be shorter than that. I thought what I'd do first is tell you a little bit about us, how we met, then tell you how we got into the lawsuit, and then we're going to talk about what it's like being in the lawsuit. So about us, I met Vic 23 years ago at a birthday party for a mutual friend, and Vic was so smitten by me and fell in love with me so immediately that I couldn't get him to quit calling me. So I finally agreed to go out with him. It's actually the opposite, but that's neither here nor there. So we had our first date in August of 1997, and we've been together since. And Vic was in the Air Force at the time, and of course, don't ask, don't tell. Yes, he deserves a medal. So he was in the military, and we couldn't be out about that. So he lived with me. We actually signed a lease. He actually paid me rent, so that if anyone ever asked, you know, we could verify that he was renting and paying rent. Now he got the rent back, you know, but you know, we had to check that box, as it were. Then, in terms of the lawsuit, after it got out in 8 years ago, yesterday, the Windsor decision was issued. And I don't know if y'all are aware of the Windsor decision, but there was a couple, Edie Windsor and her wife, got married in Canada. They lived in New York. New York recognized their marriage, but the federal government wouldn't. Edie Windsor's spouse passed away, and the federal government wanted to charge a huge estate tax on their estate when, if they were married, that wouldn't happen. So they sued, and she won, and that was 8 years ago. The Supreme Court ruled in Windsor that it was unconstitutional for the federal government to treat a same-sex couple, married couple, differently than a non-same-sex couple. So at the federal level. So I knew the minute I read that decision on that day, that it was issued 8 years ago, yesterday, I knew that if the federal government couldn't discriminate, then the states couldn't. And a friend of mine, Frank Stinger, who was the Assistant Attorney General for Aiken Gump, a large national, international law firm, called me that same day and said, you know, we talked about what we thought that lawsuit meant. What that case meant. And then he said, I think we need to find some plaintiffs to sue the state of Texas. I said, no, we've got to find a law firm that'll sue the state of Texas first. So he said, well, I wonder if my law firm will do that. And he went and talked to his law firm. And 2 weeks later, he called me back and said, hey, our law firm's willing to do it, but now we've got to find some plaintiffs. And we would, you know, kind of like to have one with, at least where one of them is a veteran. So I figured, since Vic was a veteran, that he was asking us to be part of the lawsuit. Yeah. So of course, I didn't commit us then, and didn't even know if I really wanted to, but I said, let me talk to Vic tonight. We'll see if we can come up with some names. So I did. Vic and I talked, and we decided that we would join the lawsuit. That's ultimately how it came to pass. And so the lawsuit was filed. In October. We signed up in July of 2013. The lawsuit was filed in October of 2013, and it was quite a journey, this lawsuit. So first of all, it was educational. I'm a lawyer. One of the other plaintiffs, another couple joined us. We were seeking the right to marry. We were not married and wanted to marry. And another couple from Austin joined us, a wonderful couple, Cleo and Nicole. They were married from out of state already. And so they were seeking recognition. So we basically had a rights case and a recognition case that was combined. And Nicole was a lawyer, and the other two were veterans. Cleo was a veteran and Vic was a veteran. So we kind of checked a lot of boxes. But none of us had been plaintiffs, and none of us had been involved in lawsuits as a plaintiff or a defendant. So the end result was, it was very educational. It was like the doctor in the movie, I don't know if you all have seen it, The Doctor, an oncologist that discovers he has cancer and learns what it's like to be a patient. Well, I learned what it's like to be a client.
Yes, if only he could learn to be patient. Filing the lawsuit, one of the things that the law firm said was, we'll file this and then take 2 steps to the left. There we go. That thing's gonna kill us. File the lawsuit, and any questions that come in, we'll take care of that. Press, all that stuff, not a problem. Just direct them our way. Within about 2 hours of the lawsuit being filed, Mark, at his office, at his desk, we started receiving phone calls from the media saying, hey, we want to interview you about this lawsuit. And he's at work, he's not out, he's in a position where, yeah, it's easy to get fired in Texas because there's no law that prevents it even now. There's no law that keeps you from being fired if you're LGBTQ+. So he was distraught, and actually he was physically sick from the idea that now, not only did they find him, because we'd gone through, both of us had gone through a lot of trouble to take our phone numbers out, to take our names, delete our social media, basically not be in anywhere where people could find us, and yet still they found us. Not only did they find us, but they found his cell number. So, yeah, even better. So it was a bit nerve-wracking getting through all that. As the lawsuit progressed, one of the things, we got some good stuff, but the scary stuff were things being mailed directly to our house. They had our home address. Whoever these people were, they had our address. We got letters from convicts, which was wonderful. We got to wake up every morning reading the news, where people were allowed to post. So you got a news article about the case, and then right after that is, these boys should be taken to the border and thrown across. Somebody should get a shotgun and do something about this. There was a lot of really negative stuff. And we have kids, so that's as far as I'll go with it. But there was some very, very negative things for years. So it was fun to wake up in the morning and have that. And part of the scary part was they knew where we were. We had no idea who they were. So we had to get security for the house. We had to take care, we had the babysitter come in, the babysitter for our 3 beagles would come and make sure that there was a presence, so people would think that there was always somebody in the house. And also to watch the beagles, because just poison meat thrown over the fence, that's all it would take. And some of the comments that were posted, some of these wonderful anonymograms said just exactly that. So yeah, it was not a lot of fun those 3 years. A little frustrating. Again.
No, we have to.
Finally.
So, Bleak House. Has anyone else read that? It's a Charles Dickens novel about a lawsuit that goes on for centuries. Well, that was kind of Jarndyce v. Jarndyce. That was kind of the way we felt about our lawsuit, which was, we said we would join the lawsuit in July of 2013. Well, our lawyers didn't file until late October, so that's almost 4 months later. And one of the reasons why they didn't file quickly was because they were getting a lot of expert witnesses' affidavits to support our case. We were actually better positioned for our case to go to the Supreme Court if it did than any other case in the country, except for maybe one, which was in Michigan, which ultimately did go. And then I'm not going to go through all of this chronology, but the point of me putting up this chronology is so that you can kind of get a sense of what all transpired and how long it all took. So you can know from our perspective, it was just incredibly frustrating. So that, in October, the case was filed. There was not a hearing in our case until February, so that's another 3 or 4 months. Then the Fifth Circuit didn't even recognize our case was filed and certified until May. That's another 3 months after we won in February of 2014 at the district court level, the federal district court level. The Fifth Circuit our lawyers have to send all the paperwork to the Fifth Circuit. The Texas immediately appealed. Our lawyers sent everything to the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit took 3 months to certify receiving those documents. So let me put that in perspective.
Was this when Abbott was still AG?
Abbott was still AG, but he was running for governor. And I think that played a little bit into why our case took so long. Because I think they knew they would either lose and it would go to the Supreme Court, they would lose and that would be the end of it, or if they won, it would go to the Supreme Court and they would lose. So I think from Abbott's perspective, that was not a good position to be in. I think the Fifth Circuit, frankly, accommodated that. So we wound up celebrating our 17th anniversary together that year. The Fifth Circuit didn't have a hearing in our case until January of 2015. So remember, we won in our case at the local level in February of 2014. So it's now almost a year later before the Fifth Circuit's even hearing our case. So let me put that in perspective. All the other circuits that were hearing these cases across the country, they took 3 to 3.5 months to have a briefing, to have oral arguments, and to make a decision. We didn't get a hearing for a year. And then Obergefell, the Supreme Court granted cert in Obergefell. An amicus brief for us was filed with the Supreme Court. And a hearing was held on April 28th of 2015. We attended that. It was fairly interesting to have some guy in the middle of it. First of all, you can't stand up. You have to stand in line to wait to go in, and you can't leave the Supreme Court hearing to go to the bathroom, which is not good for me. So I quit drinking the night before, had no fluids, dehydrated, and you cannot stand up or they will throw you out. You can't go to the bathroom, they will throw you out. So we're sitting there and some guy a couple rows away stood up and started screaming about how everyone was going to hell, damnation, this is awful. And of course, you can't even stand up to look. The marshals are dragging the guy out as he's screaming all kinds of religious obscenities. And then Scalia, God rest his soul, said, "Oh, well, that was refreshing." And of course, everyone in the room laughed, except I didn't find it particularly refreshing or humorous. So then the Supreme Court issued its decision in June, 6 years ago, in June 26, 2015, and the Fifth Circuit still took a week to issue its decision in our case. And the decision in our case was used against Ken Paxton, Texas Attorney General, to preclude him from denying other same-sex couples listings as being a couple on death certificates and on birth certificates. And our injunction in our case still to this day is in place. So if the state of Texas violates that, someone can take him to court. So I think that's so now we get to the saddening. There were a bunch of different emotions. The last one was frustrating. Saddening was I had a friend of mine who I'm an OU football fan. Don't hold that against me. Oh, there we go. Boomer. So, and a friend of mine in San Antonio is a Longhorn fan, and we always bet a lunch on the OU Texas game. Had since 1987. And he texted me after he saw in the news that we had filed this lawsuit. texted me and said that filing bothered him, but we were still friends. I tried calling him, he wouldn't take my call, we still haven't talked. We don't, basically I lost that friendship as a result of that lawsuit, and I consider that one of the saddest things about it.